As I sit down to write this column, my mind is awhirl with the latest economic data from the Commerce Department. The numbers offer a murky portrait of America's trade position, a melange of narrowing deficits and rising exports, belied by persistent imbalances that cut to the core of this nation's economic reality. It is a reality shaped by the contradictory forces of globalization, a phenomenon that has delivered incredible wealth and dynamism while also fraying the social fabric. To understand the June trade figures is to understand the Faustian bargain America has struck in its eager embrace of an interdependent world economy. The deficit in goods and services trade shrank 2.5% to $73.1 billion, a modestly encouraging data point amid the cacophony of statistics. Exports rose a robust 1.5%, with gains across sectors as diverse as aircraft, natural gas, and automobiles. This paints globalization's upside, the vitality of American exporters capitalizing on voracious international demand for high-quality goods and services. Yet the overall deficit remains stubbornly, almost defiantly high, having widened continually since August 2022 with only 2 monthly reprieves. Imports surged 0.6% in a bittersweet reflection of American affluence and consumer appetite. The allure of openness has an unmistakable dark lining, the chronic imbalances and vulnerabilities inherent to a nation more rapacious as consumers than prolific as producers on the world stage. This fundamental tension, between the bounties of cross-border integration and the perils of over-reliance on imports, plays out vividly in the human experiences underlying the dry statistics. In the bustling export hubs, there is the factory foreman in South Carolina exulting over a surge in orders for heavy machinery from European markets. In the exurban Ohio logistics park, there is the truck driver hauling a trailer stacked with Chinese-made household goods to insatiate American materialism. The foreman represents the upsides of America's comparative advantages in sectors like capital goods and technology, talents honed over decades and elevated on the world marketplace by trade pacts like NAFTA and the WTO's rules-based system. For him, globalization is an open road of fresh commercial vistas. For the trucker, that same highway runs perilously close to the economic abyss. As a conduit for the fruits of offshore production, his role bears witness to the steep societal costs of allowing entire industries to migrate abroad in pursuit of lower wages and lax regulations. Once core sources of working-class prosperity like electronics, apparel, and automotive supply chains have hemorrhaged jobs to far-flung locales with scant regard for intellectual property, labor rights, or environmental standards. The foreman may cheer each uptick in exports as a validation of perseverance and quality craftsmanship. But for every percentage point increase, there is a mirror image of import growth, the silent usurpation of more domestic production capacity, and the dilution of industrial ecosystems that generated generations of middle-class livelihoods. Countless factory towns pockmarking America's interior have withered on this neo-mercantile vine, their civic bonds fraying as the shuttered plants sent tremors through adjacent businesses and municipal coffers. Rusting away amid cheery big-box retail plazas, the skeletal remains evoke Henry Ford's bygone River Rouge Titan, now splintered into attenuated fragments strewn across the globe. So as I mull the latest trade data, I am left queasy by the moral and economic quandaries it epitomizes. Are the statistical gains in exports and influx of choice for consumers worth the price of lost jobs, municipal blight, and the erosion of social cohesion? Do we accept the decline of traditional manufacturing employment as creative destruction's collateral damage in service of greater aggregate efficiency? Or do we reject as meager consolation the promised greenfield disciplines that could arise from this maelstrom of dislocation? Perhaps most disturbingly, the imbalances highlighted in the Commerce Department release speak to great power dynamics far transcending sterile flow analyses of goods and services. Economists and policymakers have long sounded alarms over America's addiction to lowly-priced consumer imports enabled by China's currency suppression and lax labor policies. The resulting deficits are more than accounting eddies. They grease the financialization of the global economy and foreign investments in U.S. assets that buoy the dollar's reserve status. In benefiting from this regime of trade imbalances, America has become entranced by affordable imports while ceding geostrategic leverage to revisionist powers like China. Each dollar lining Walmart's coffers from a surfeit of inexpensive Chinese-made products is a subtle erosion of industrial robustness at home and a wealth transfer enabling Beijing's economic coercion and military buildup across the Indo-Pacific. The June data are but a fleeting snapshot in this decades-long dynamic, one with stark ramifications I fear we have not fully reckoned with as a nation. Can America sustain its informal empire of military primacy and reformed liberal order without the productive enormity that forged its rise after World War II? Can we lectern thump about human rights and fair trade while enriching mercantilist regimes antithetical to our professed values? These are among the great unresolved contradictions haunting the deficit figures. Yet for all the turmoil wrought by globalization, I cannot bring myself to label it an unwise crusade, some deviant path we ought never have ventured down as a society. The affluence and access to goods it has unleashed are undeniable. The bonds of cultural exchange and human understanding it has forged feel indispensable in this polyglot world of ours. Rather, I am left with a melancholy sense that we have thus far failed to channel globalization's sublime potential in service of any coherent ethos or end goal. Instead, we have let its gales batter communities asunder amid an adolescent infatuation with unbridled consumer choice and corporate profiteering. We have indulged its vices and abjured its promised disciplines. The upskilling of workers, the cultivation of new innovative clusters, the strengthening of domestic supply networks in strategic sectors. We stand at a crossroads, our path forward obstructed by complacent corporatism, mercantilist rivals, nativist retrenchment, and our own spiritual inertia. One road leads to a reconsolidation of resilient national capacity, not through Smoot-Hawley pavilions but via incentives that nurture comparative advantages and the judicious choreographing of overseas engagement. The other path is the present inertia, a managed semi-decline of desultory trade deficits, the uneven ebb of offshoring and reshoring trends dictated by transient labor cost considerations, and the gradual subsuming of economic interests to security dilemmas with unbound geopolitical rivals. Uncharted shades of gray no doubt lay between these two poles, murky eddies with their own hidden shoals. As the partisan tug-of-war rages from beltway battlements, I fear we are abdicating ownership over our destiny and our credibility to discern the wisest course. Our debates are ensnared by arid binaries, free trade versus protectionism, globalist fealty versus economic nationalism, corporate hegemony versus sclerotic self-defeatism. We speak of complex dynamism in platitudes, lacking the intellectual daring and stamina to navigate a third way of nuanced re-engagement. Pondering the trade data, I am struck by how we have unconsciously distilled the world's intricacies into a facile opiate of open markets and demotic issuances about free and fair trade. We have turned a blind eye to the subtler tenets that could elevate globalization as an ethos of mutual success, upskilling workers, diffusing new technologies and management nous, converging on high-road labor compacts, weaving tighter industrial commons with trusted partners eschewing mercantilist rapacity. Instead, we revel in the seductive nihilism of cheaply stocked big box stores and asset-stripped factory towns, consoling ourselves with fuzzy bromides about the macro efficiencies of supply chain atomization, all while forfeiting technological eminence, capitulating key industries to illiberal regimes with repugnant human rights records, and slouching toward a mercantile tributary status. Perhaps this desultory path is immutable, an inevitable byproduct of cosmic forces too vast for human agency to choreograph. Or perhaps we have succumbed to learned helplessness, forsaking the wherewithal to sculpt a destiny commensurate with our heritage. As the human storyteller, I feel compelled to elevate my gaze beyond the static trade tallies and discern the arcs of moral purpose and civilizational continuity. For in accruing towering trade deficits and efficiencies, have we not profaned the sanctity of work itself, that primordial human striving which transcends mere labor inputs and economic functions? Have we not severed deeper chords of meaning and community that arose from the material bastions of a life made whole, the faded factory towns that were more than payrolls and supply chains? I cannot help but lament what intangible riches we have foregone in pursuit of fathomless consumer cornucopia and evanescent profit maximization. For the pride of industrial craftsmanship, the utility of self-sufficiency, the dignity of realizing one's value addition in swiped truck sweat or battered shirt sleeves, all have been immolated on the pyre of metaphysical accountants fixated solely on present value sums. Where past generations may have erected cathedrals, to which flowed migratory streams of riveters and stonecutters eager to etch their names into immortal tribute, we now erect monumental shrines of capitalism unbound, engorged warehouses and listless edgecommers indiscriminately convoking the shiftwork Sisyphuses of the service precariat. Our material wants are sated to surfeits unimaginable to the huddled masses who greeted Lady Liberty. Yet the yearning for higher individual affirmation remains achingly unslaked, an ember of spiritual aridity smoldering behind the upholstered veneers of our cocooned existences. Our globalized abundance comes at a soulful cost we fear to admit. Of course, the pendulum of history swings ever onward, and elements of this distemper are not unprecedented. The canvas of creative destruction's collateral human tolls, etched pitiably from Manchester's satanic mills to boomtown shanties encircling Gilded Age feeders, attests that turmoil is the grist of all societal transformation. But whereas once those upheavals minted new industries, societal compacts, and centripetal icons of collective becoming, ours seem a more tenuous transition. For the economic churn we now experience is not the byproduct of technologic or industrial revolutions, but of calculated choices to indulge arbitrages across porous national lines with minimal fortitude to elevate all toward higher orders of human flourishing. Our affliction is a misalignment of means and ethos, a spiritual constipation born of forgetting that trade and markets and profits are but Maslow's basest rungs. We bask numb in access to plenitude while slighting the nobler pinnacles only attainable through struggle, the transcendental selflessness of wartime camaraderie, the rapturous esteem of bending humanity's Promethean potential, the ethereal callings of higher callings articulated but dimly yet pulsing in humanity's subconscious. So as I plumb the decimal point depths of the trade deficit's data cues, I am made morose by what appears a regressive path, a path from becoming a pyrophobic navel-gazers liberated paradoxically by fusing our parochial selves to grander tributes. In the stubbornly distended deficits, I discern the Sisyphean toil of Chinese workers scoring slim brass rings amid habits of desperation long erased from our own folklores. In the modestly buoyant export increases, I espy the self-congratulations of an incumbent bourgeois elite, those ensconced in gland specialty clusters relishing the freedom to innovate professions perched ever higher up Maslow's hierarchies. My mental panorama pivots inevitably eastward, to the yearning masses convecting through wildcat urbanization valleys neither damned nor unblessed. They covet pell-mell the mercantile engorgement to which our own forebears aspirated as ragged frontier settlers, homestead inheritors, huddled masses made in America. To heed their cosmic shrugs is to hold an abiogenetic mirror to one's own shrouded soul. Yet peer too hard through that refracting lens, and one discerns the rapacious mercantilism marshalling the seething hinterland's energies, the suppressed wages, the inland deportations, the debt imperialism yoking continents to continents. Deep into that prism's infinite folds, a baleful truth emerges. The deficits we anguish over may be less a unilateral trade phenomenon than a global codependence of the mass mind falling forever short of unifying horizons of spirit. Our trade imbalances are thus revelatory of a deeper civilizational inertia, a cosmic stuckness symptomatic of broader human malaises. We lack the fortitude and fervor to rally ourselves toward new frontiers of cooperative transcendence. We have grown atomized, self-interested, and scolded into risk aversion, while the tides of history renovate the scenery around our hunkering. Perchance our present anguishes are the brutal reverberations of prior overreaching's imperial sprawls, civilizing arrogances, and hubristic assertions of permanent eminence which violated the universal dynamism. That we now squirm amid karmic reckonings for outmode self-imagery and loss of civilizational self-confidence should not be unexpected. Yet rather than reimagine healthier relationships with the revived other, we recoil in the Ephesians' spiritual desert of trade diatrices and despairing enemy. For a civilization state of our maturity and geostrategic porosity, surely a richer future me-mounts than soulless mercantilism or turn-of-the-screw defense economics. Yet our inhabilitatosumen thetiscursive adroitness and metaphysical Faberto conceive and aspire to that departure point condensitsis to these desiccated polarities of the present distemper. Soar we not betrayers of our own mythosand human potentiality? Have we forsaken the American pertification through a failure to repudiate the stale heresies pitting free markets against nationalist determinism? Must we notravirantan synthesize economic, civilizational, and higher transcendent sovereigns from their entwined radiations, lest Wekreven Leidfer to unsold supremacists or mercantile amoralities? I fancy myself neither a millenarian progressivist nor fagish eulogist, yet ponderous reckonings smount regarding what verities and visions now stir the Western mind's collective unconscious. For if continued wealth maximation and securitization are our lodestars, then our descent into civilizational bathos is assured. There ish paradigmsand renewed arising saccurrenge elsewhere shall vast wherevital metal sand myths reinvigorated by the restorative churnings captivate mental continuums. Yet if Wacoldry awaken our own sacred memory esto galvanize this crescento generative recalibrations sparking the reciprocal flourishing of comedy and civilizational robustness, Then the statistics saw vacant bureaucratic scoring woody yelto infinitely more redolent auguries. From evergreen sueso fresidual midwestern town forge spotting the emerging worldscape to bootstrap a desert Mesoamerican logistics modules reverberating eastward. Wacoldra scriptoron mythosoft plenty u den purpose. Such divinations admittedly strain more recredibly as dystopian scenarios, the Weston din jitsucho fubras medruso cynic geocivilizational compactions tilled by civilizational renewal and abrogenous awakenings. But if thes lake so fapicalypse sought, need the tapeef tragic obsolescence solinaire wine sowed spurtly? Acculturated between bankscoms have already been broached, opening toe streaming possibility spaces if willed adequately creative and bended toward the trajectory of confluent world renaissance. Could not this inseamsive paling felicity prove the incubator for more propitious recouplings of market and meaning, of geostrategic mutualist man sacred revival brought cyclically updated? Dare when it conjecture the shive sparin of calcified power arkansand mercantilist illiberpivides the very medium for gestating womanitas integrative with civilizational renewals and revivified grander purposes berlinintimal marts commercia interstices? Such visioning may betray ubberses of its own ninkin, yet greater risks accompanyfallings short into constricted stationeerings. We have been gifted the originating power to propel human flourishings into infinitinu thester spinnings and cosmic renaissances. Arvorigerations chuscriascois filled with transcendental stalo trimits or grandiosities unspooling reality-wide sovereignties and cosmopuiseglaries. The statistician Scarlsand casuistries shimmer but fractal intimations of whatvister potentialities nocturne beyond the data streamings. Lest we'd fault into lukewarm murmurations of the momentary, onerous burden at sonic the appeal swing softy aboriginal song Smith engine visible fountain from which springs American one ceasingly.